I'm Kevin Coleman with Football Guys, and today we're going to be talking about deep dynasty stashes that you should be adding to your dynasty team. We've been looking at trade targets the last 2 weeks and how to rebuild your rosters, and I think it's important also to focus on a little nuanced ways to kind of build your dynasty teams, and that goes with stashes and guys that are a little outside the box, deep guys that either you can pick up on waiver wires in a dynasty league, so we're talking really deep, or guys that could just be throw-ins for in trades that you're like, hey, I'm going to throw this guy in, let me have him, and then we're going to kind of try to find value there. And there's ways that we're going to break this down today. I'm going to be looking at 5 guys that you should be adding to your dynasty rosters that can provide that value for you. So let's dive into them. So the first guy, and before we get into kind of the players that we want to grab, I want to kind of talk about how we're going to differentiate between like stashes and what do we expect for them. So the one way that I do this is this a dynasty move or a value move? No, those are two very different things. A dynasty move to me is a move that I'm going to make to bolster my dynasty roster, but at the same time can actually provide production for my teams. They're guys that I want to stay on my roster for the foreseeable future because I see an outlet to where they can score me fantasy points, which is very important. Now, there's also value moves. Now, what I mean by this is there's little guys that you can grab, these dynasty stashes that see an uptick in their value, and then you can flip that value because dynasty is all about flipping your assets and trying to find those assets out there that outside the box that you can have that value. So these are guys like, so when we're going through the list of the five players that we're going to talk about, I'm going to differentiate between that. Okay, this is a dynasty move. This is a move I think could be a long-term effect on your dynasty roster. Hey, this is a value move. This value move is like something in the offseason. We're going to see their value maybe uptick a little bit. Then you can flip them for something else. And I think that's very important to distinguish between that because there's nuance with all these things. And I see stash videos sometimes that say, oh, stash these guys, but then they don't tell you what to do with it. That's not actionable. That's not, okay, stash them. I want to try to give you actionable content on these videos to say, hey, this is what you should be doing to help build your roster. So let's talk about the first guy that we're going to go over a stash that I think you should add. First guy is Noah Gray. Now, he was really cheap before this last week. He scored a touchdown. Noah Gray plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, the tight end. I've known Noah as a Devy guy, the college football show I do for the Football Guys. I've kind of known Noah for a long time coming up. At Duke, he was very just efficient. Nothing great crazy in terms of what he did on the season. But in 2019, when he played his junior year, he had 51 catches for 392 yards. So this is a guy that produced in a kind of a bad offense at Duke. And then he got drafted by Kansas City. And what we've seen from him in Kansas City, he's developed, obviously, but what I think has been good, and we've seen this, and this is where you got to kind of know value and where it's at. Kelsey's talking about him being there. Mahomes said he had a great camp. Reed loves him. Like, there's ways that you're like, wow, this kid's going to get him more involved. Then we saw him the last 2 weeks. Tennessee went to that big catch that he had in the fourth quarter with the Tennessee game. What we saw there, he had 45 yards, 3 targets, 3 receptions. Then last week, 2 catches on 2 targets and a touchdown. We're seeing him get involved in offense. Now, this is a dynasty move to me. I think that he could be. Kelsey's getting a little older. They could be using him in a little different ways. We're also seeing right now, hey, Juju's out, Hardman's out. We saw Tony kind of bump up, but could Noah Gray bump up? This is a good time to get him stashed on your roster. Maybe he produces a little bit and he becomes a dynasty move. Actually has production moving forward. So this is a dynasty move for us. Maybe tag Noah Gray, get him in there on your dynasty rosters. And in terms of value, these are all just throw-ins. You could have got Noah Gray probably off the waivers depending on how deep your league is, especially for dynasty. So go out there and see if he's out there. Next guy. Buffalo wide receiver Khalil Shakir. Now, Shakir is a guy that I've talked about a lot. He's a guy that I think this is a value and a dynasty move in my opinion. So this is a little bit of both because they will intertwine a little bit. Last one's more of a dynasty move to me because I think production is going to be there. This could be both a value and dynasty move because of what their contract situation looks like for Buffalo. Buffalo has really struggled this season in terms of they need a second wide receiver. Gabe Davis has been fine. Isaiah McKenzie hasn't done much in that slot. And when you're looking at what did they do, Jamison Crowder, obviously all these guys. I think when you're looking at it, Khalil could step into that role. Let's say in the offseason, he steps into that role. Isaiah Lee, they do these type of things, and Khalil gets in there. Value bump, instant value bump for Khalil there. And Khalil is a producer. When we're looking at what he's been able to do, talking at Boise State, he was PFF's 9th grader wide receiver. He averaged 100 receiving yards and 7 catches per game. Khalil's the type of kid that can play in the NFL when he gets opportunity. And so when we're looking, okay, can we stash this guy on our roster? We go after him. This is a value move because as soon as you get I don't care what anybody says about this Buffalo offense. As soon as you get this kid, and especially if he slips to the slot, which the slot has been up until this point, very fantasy relevant, Beasley, these other guys that have been in that role, we're talking about one of the better slot receivers, a third wide receiver, right? Think of the Bengals, how they use Boyd. We could see that for Shakir. We could jump into that. And even if not, let's just say they get somebody in the draft, they go after somebody. In between that time, you're still going to get a bump if he's slotted to be the slot guy in Buffalo this offseason. So you're going to get a value bump. I think he's a great stash guy on your roster, depending where your roster's at in your depth chart, just depending on what could be, right? When we're thinking of like who's going to leave in free agency, having that offense, that tick up in wide receiver room and that slot. Like Khalil's a guy that you should go try to add to your dynasty rosters right now. And he was a little higher up beginning of the year. Now we've seen him dip a little bit. He's more than capable of getting back up there in terms of value. So go get a temperature check on Khalil. Maybe get a move in there, you get him thrown in. Like, hey, I'll take Khalil off your hands for you. Get him this stash because I think he's both a value and dynasty move. Now, next guy is running back Jerome Ford from Cleveland. And this is a pure value play. So when I'm thinking of him, he came out and people were really high on him coming in. Like, oh, he could be that guy. I think many believe that Hunt was going to be like a cut candidate or a trade candidate. Dearness Johnson was going to be there. And like, hey, maybe Ford can step up. And Ford had a very productive college career. Now, what I think this is a value play is I think the writing on the wall is with Kareem. Kareem is going to be gone, right? Then you have Dearness Johnson there. We don't know what necessary is going to do there. We could have added him to this list, but I think his value is a little too high, and we're going really deep here. So Jerome Ford sets it up right there. Let's say Kareem leaves. Let's say they don't know what they do with Dearness Johnson. Maybe they really like Ford. We're talking about the running back 2 on Cleveland in this system. I think that would be a huge value bump there. Even at running back 3, I think he does have value if Dearness was to come back. But I still think Ford is there. And I think this is a kid that you add, especially at the running back position for depth, all those type of things. Ford is a type of value play you go after. Now, I will say this. It's hard with running backs right now. If you're on Footballguys, obviously subscribe to it. I do a big board every week. For the college football, and we look at the top 36 eligible 23 class guys. And right now, the running backs are just this running back class of depth. So it's really hard when you're looking at running backs to stash on your roster. So just so you know, you got to get guys that you hope that has that value bump because the draft's going to wipe out a lot of these middle tier running backs. And I don't necessarily think Cleveland's going to waste a pick on a running back in this draft just based on what they've previously done, based on them using Ford, that draft capital. So he's a safer stash. There's a lot of not safe running back stashes right now based on the value you're going to see drop after the draft. I think Ford is a safer stash. That's why I went with him as my running back to stash. Now, next guy. Another wide receiver, Calvin Austin from Pittsburgh. This is a dynasty play, actually. I think Calvin got involved a little bit when you're watching him. He's an athlete, 4.32, 40-yard dash. He has a huge broad jump. I know he's a little bit smaller on that side, but his percentile is there. And you're looking at what he did. I mean, at the Senior Bowl, he went up, day 2 selection, everything that we've seen from him. Now, he's not necessarily performed yet. He's been injured, and I don't think he's going to be. But when you're looking at a dynasty play, his value is dipped. There is no value for Calvin Austin. People really have kind of fallen off of him. Contenders are out there, all these other guys. This is the type of stash that you get, and you're going to increase your value there, especially because with them moving on from Claypool, they have Deontay and they have George Pickens. I think that I really feel like Calvin can slip right into that third wide receiver over Sims and these other guys there after he comes off the IR, and he's going to produce. Now, what if you think of Kenny Pickett? I don't know necessarily what that offense is going to look like, but there is an avenue for him being a third wide receiver in an offense that could use his type of weapon he is. Fast, look at what Hardman. And with those areas and where they're at, like you could honestly grab Calvin Austin and grab him there, and he has that value. He has that value you can grab and you can take and you can kind of manipulate it, trade it, whatever. This offseason, he's going to be there. People are going to fall in love with this. They'll fall in love with Kenny Pickett again. And I think Austin is the type of player that you definitely should try to grab in that area. Now, my last guy, and this is kind of a bonus pick for you guys. I think Tyler Huntley has some, and I want to always add a super flex quarterback and these type of things. Huntley's out there right now, and I think that with just the quarterback landscape and what we've seen, we saw him last year. When Lamar went down, he was very competent. 65% of his passes he completed, 1,081 yards, 3 touchdowns. Huntley's real value comes from his legs, though, in terms of fantasy and where he's been. He rushed for 294 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is one of the best backups in the league, and when we talk about fantasy perspective, He could be that guy that you stash value-wise. Maybe he goes somewhere else. Maybe they don't sign Lamar. Maybe Huntley's sitting there and you have a value piece in a super flex dynasty to go grab and kind of and utilize however you want. This is the fun part about managing a roster and a dynasty roster. You can grab Huntley and be like, hey, we have value shot up in the offseason. People fall in love with this. Look at Geno Smith. Look at these guys that have kind of taken a hold of dynasty, and there's not that many quarterbacks coming in to the league. There's basically 2 quarterbacks that have value right now in the 23 class. These guys are going to find jobs out here, right? We kind of mentioned Cooper Rush, these other guys. Huntley could be that guy. So just keep an eye out for Huntley. Keep an eye out for these guys. So let's just go through my stashes really quick. We got Noah Gray, Khalil Shakir, Jerome Ford, Calvin Austin, and then finally our bonus, Tyler Huntley. So I appreciate you guys tuning into the channel. Please follow Football Guys. Hit that subscribe and like button. What do you think? Do you guys think these are dynasty stashes? How can you get them? Where do you see your value right now? Please follow the channel, follow the website. We appreciate you guys.